He called me just a housewife in front of his friends, his staff, and even our kids. He had no idea I owned the house, traced every dime, and held the receipts that could destroy him. Now, every month, he wires me hush money just to keep his name clean. I met Ryan in college. He was loud, confident, and always the center of attention. He walked into a room like it already belonged to him, and to be honest, it was magnetic. I was quieter back then, more observant. Where he talked about global takeovers and IPO dreams, I talked about a life with meaning, with peace. Still, we clicked. By the time we graduated, Ryan had his first business plan on paper, and I had an engagement ring on my finger. He asked me to take a leap of faith. "Give me 5 years," he said. "Help me build this, and then we'll live like royalty." I didn't hesitate. I cashed out my small inheritance, about $45,000, and put it all into his startup. I told myself I wasn't giving it to him. I was investing in us. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 39 years old now, and I've lived through a quiet kind of war most people never see. The kind that wears pearls and smiles for family photos. The kind that happens in kitchens and car rides, over birthday cakes, and under shared bank accounts. Back then, I was just 24 and full of trust. When the business started to take off, Ryan got busier. I left my job as a paralegal to take care of our newborn daughter. He said we could afford it now, and that he needed to focus. 1 year became 2, and soon we had a second child. The plan was always to go back to work once they were both in school, but somehow that milestone kept moving. Our days became a pattern. I ran the house, raised the kids, cooked every meal, kept every schedule tight. Ryan chased his next big milestone: investors, expansions, awards. I clapped from the sidelines, never asking for much. I reminded myself that his success was our success. He used to call me his rock. That slowly turned into the home base, and eventually, just a housewife. It started as a joke. One day, at a party, he introduced me to someone as the CEO of our house. Everyone laughed, including me, but something inside me folded a little. It was the first time I realized he no longer saw me as his partner. I was support staff, unpaid, unnoticed, always expected. I remember standing at the sink one night, scrubbing dried oatmeal out of a bowl while he sat in the den scrolling through emails. I was bone tired, and I caught myself wondering, what would happen if I just stopped? If I just didn't do everything? The answer came quickly. Everything would fall apart. But I told myself it was temporary, that once the kids were older, we'd reconnect. I believed in what we were building, our family, our future. I still saw us as a team, even if the scoreboard was lopsided. Looking back, I can see how naive that was, but at the time, I wasn't ready to let go of the dream. The first time I really felt it was during a dinner with his new investors. We were at a downtown steakhouse, low lighting, leather booths, the kind of place where deals get made and egos stretch their legs. I had taken extra time getting ready, slipped on a soft navy dress and heels I hadn't worn in months. Ryan barely looked up from his phone when I walked down the stairs. "You look fine," he muttered. At dinner, the men were loud, full of jokes and bravado. I sat beside Ryan, trying to follow the conversation. Tech platforms, margins, projections. When someone asked what I did, Ryan answered before I could. "Claire runs the house," he said with a smirk. "Keeps the kids alive. Keeps me sane." The table chuckled. I smiled too, but my ears were burning. That night, I lay awake while Ryan snored beside me. I stared at the ceiling, turning the phrase over and over, "keeps the kids alive." I wasn't angry, not yet, but I felt something shifting. I was becoming a symbol, a reliable fixture in the background. No longer Claire, the woman who helped him draft early contracts and built the first website from scratch. Just the one who made sure dinner was on the table and birthday gifts were wrapped. Over the next year, the jokes continued. At BBQs, at his company's holiday party. "Claire's living the dream," he'd say. "Yoga, errands, Netflix, She's got it rough. People laughed because they didn't know better, and I stopped correcting them because I was tired of explaining that stay at home didn't mean stress free. It meant unpaid, unrelenting, and invisible. Ryan's tone changed too. When he came home late, I was too emotional. When I asked about certain expenses, I was snooping. When I mentioned going back to work, he said, "Why? So we can pay for daycare and takeout? We don't need your salary." He wasn't saying I couldn't work. He was saying I shouldn't. There's a difference. He started traveling more, often without much notice. I'd wake up to find a note on the fridge. Flight at 6 a.m., be back Thursday. No kiss goodbye, no heads up, just disappearance treated as routine. Once, our son had a fever that wouldn't break. I called Ryan in a panic, unsure whether to go to the ER. He didn't answer. I texted, nothing. The next morning, he called, annoyed. "Claire, I was on a red eye. You need to handle these things." I had handled it. Alone, like always. I noticed he no longer asked about my day. He didn't see how tired I was, or how lonely. I kept the house clean, the kids happy, the fridge full, but I might as well have been wallpaper. His dismissals weren't always loud. Most of them were quiet, surgical, a laugh here, a sigh there. A slowly closing door I didn't realize I was behind until it clicked shut. One day, I found a receipt in his coat pocket. Dinner for two at a Michelin star restaurant in a city he said he'd be in for just one night. The date didn't match. The city didn't match. My stomach nodded, but I said nothing. That was the moment I knew something had changed, not just in our marriage, but in me. I was done making excuses for him. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was starting to listen to my silence, and hers was louder than his noise. It wasn't one thing that confirmed the affair. It was a slow drizzle of evidence, so steady and careless it almost felt deliberate, like he wasn't trying to hide it anymore. The final crack began with a password reset. Ryan had asked me to check something in his email weeks earlier, a hotel reservation for one of his board meetings. When I tried to access it again a month later to find a receipt for our taxes, the password had changed. I asked him about it casually. He looked up from his phone and shrugged. "I made us update everything. Two-factor now, company policy." I nodded, but a strange chill ran through me. Ryan wasn't careless. If anything, he was paranoid about control. So why lock me out of something that had always been open? That night, I pulled out an old laptop he'd used years ago. I figured maybe there was a trace of his old email. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, just trying to breathe through the nausea. And there it was. His email still auto-logged on one browser, not his main account. A second one, personal, sloppier. There were messages from Allie, an assistant apparently, but not in the HR files I'd seen when I used to help him onboard staff in the early days. Her emails were short, familiar. They read like someone mid-affair, confident, casual, coded. "Miss you already. Last night was amazing. Should I book us the same suite next week?" My hands were shaking. I clicked through older emails and it got worse. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was planning to leave me and had been for a while. There were forwarded documents between Ryan and his business partner, speculative divorce plans, discussions of minimizing financial damage, even offhand comments like, "She won't push back, she doesn't work." They had outlined a strategy that painted me as a dependent, as someone who provided emotional support but no tangible value. I found a message that made me sit completely still. If Claire tries to fight this, remind her she hasn't worked a paid job in over a decade. Family court won't give her much. She doesn't know what she's entitled to. There it was. He had rewritten me in his mind, not as his wife, not as the woman who built his first website, who helped him cold call investors, who raised 2 children while he traveled the world, but as dead weight, an inconvenient expense. I didn't cry, not then. I remember feeling oddly lucid, like I had stepped outside my own skin and was just observing it all from the corner of the room. He didn't come home that night. I stared at my face in the mirror for what felt like hours, not to study the wrinkles or dark circles, but to remember who I was before I disappeared into his life. The next morning, I made pancakes for the kids and packed their lunches like everything was normal, because for them, it still was. But inside me, something broke, and something else began to form in its place. A quiet, cold structure, clean, unemotional, purpose-built. I started keeping records, phone logs, account numbers, every bank statement. I stopped asking questions and started gathering answers. And I scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney 2 towns over, one with no ties to Ryan's circle. The lawyer's name was Mona. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a blade, and didn't blink once when I laid everything out. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You've been underestimated. That's your biggest asset right now." I felt a strange mix of grief and validation. Mona brought in a forensic accountant. We found discrepancies, hidden transfers, offshore whispers, and most critically, my $45,000 inheritance, traceable from my account into the foundation of his company. He had never given me equity, but the money trail didn't lie. And legally, that meant leverage. I also found the deed to our home, tucked in a folder in the back of the filing cabinet, still in my name from when my parents had gifted us the down payment. He'd never bothered to refinance. He assumed, like always, that he had control. He didn't. That's when I understood. He'd been so focused on silencing me emotionally that he'd forgotten to protect himself logistically. He thought I had nothing, but what I had was the truth. And I was done staying quiet. From the outside, nothing changed. I still packed the kids' lunches, still smiled at school pickup, still laughed politely at neighborhood barbecues. I was methodical in my routine because routine gave me cover. Inside that rhythm, I was building something entirely different. I didn't confront Ryan, not yet. The truth was, I didn't want a fight. I wanted control, and for the first time in years, I had something he didn't know about: time. I scheduled my meetings during school hours in neighboring towns, always using cash when I could. Mona and her accountant worked quietly, methodically. She kept reminding me, "Don't tip your hand. The minute he knows you're aware, he'll move everything." So, I became someone else. Not Claire, the housewife. Claire, the strategist. Claire, the archivist. I printed everything: bank transfers, emails, flight logs, even photos from his assistant's Instagram, posts he probably assumed I'd never see. A weekend business retreat in Napa that perfectly matched a charge on his card, a selfie with his reflection blurred in the wine glass. Every night I tucked my kids into bed. Every morning I smiled at Ryan like nothing had changed. He didn't notice the shift in my tone, the slightly shorter answers, the moments I paused too long before speaking. He was too comfortable, too arrogant. One afternoon, while he was on a trip, I stood in our bedroom and opened every drawer. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was taking inventory. My inventory. Jewelry, documents, old drives, the folder with our prenup. Unsigned, buried in dust. That same week, I called a locksmith and had the locks quietly rekeyed. Just once. Just so I'd know how quickly it could be done when the time came. The house was legally mine. That fact began to feel like an anchor, something solid beneath all the uncertainty. I had assumed we co-owned it for years, but he never finalized the transfer. The name on the title was mine alone. Mona's team pulled more. They discovered that some of Ryan's investment funds were improperly reported. There were inconsistencies in tax filings, fake shell companies he used for consulting fees that looped back into personal spending. It was enough to scare any CEO if it came out publicly. And now, I had all of it. One evening, he came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. I was already in bed, reading. He didn't look at me when he walked in, just dropped his bag and muttered, "I'll be out early tomorrow. Don't wait up." I marked my place in the book and looked at him for a long time, calmly, silently. He didn't notice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anger, but anticipation. Not fear, but calculation. I was nearly ready. There was just one piece left. I wrote a list, what I wanted, not just legally, emotionally. I wanted full custody. I wanted 70% of our joint assets. I wanted the house, and I wanted a legally binding NDA, non-disclosure agreement. He would never be allowed to speak about the divorce, about me, or about what I knew. And if he refused, I had backups of every document stored in a fireproof safe, another with Mona, and another ready to send to a journalist he once mocked in an email. I didn't want revenge. I wanted silence, his silence, and I was going to make sure he paid for it. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was pretending everything was still normal, while I held a secret war chest in my hands. By now, Mona had everything cataloged: financial misrepresentations, personal emails, photos, and the timeline of my inheritance investment. We had enough to create a divorce petition that wouldn't just challenge Ryan, it would threaten everything he'd built. But Mona was strategic. "We don't want a fight," she said. "We want surrender, so we give him a choice: quiet cooperation or public humiliation." So we crafted a proposal: clean, clear, cold. I would get full custody of both children, the house in full, 70% of our joint liquid assets, monthly payments categorized as voluntary family support, a private legal settlement agreement with a tightly written NDA. And in return, he would keep his business, his reputation, his privacy. The proposal was tucked inside a slim manila folder. It sat in my kitchen drawer for 2 weeks while I rehearsed every possible outcome. Meanwhile, I kept building the exit ramp. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I found a small co-working space under a monthly lease agreement, my fallback location in case I needed to leave quickly. I visited a trauma-informed therapist, not because I was breaking down, but because I wanted to stay strong, steady, composed. Emotionally, I had already left. What remained was timing. One Friday morning, after the kids were dropped off and Ryan was home between trips, I asked him to meet me in the living room. I said it gently, like I was inviting him to coffee. He glanced up, distracted, already annoyed. "Can we do this later?" "No," I said. "Now is fine." He sat. His body language said everything: lazy, confident, ready to dismiss whatever this was. I handed him the folder. I didn't speak. At first, he didn't react. He flipped through the pages with casual boredom. But then, I saw it. The moment his mouth tightened, the way his eyes narrowed at the mention of tax inconsistencies. His hand froze at the page where my inheritance was traced directly into his first business fund. He closed the folder slowly and looked up at me. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked, voice flat. "It's the deal I'm offering you," I said. "Claire, you're not getting custody." I smiled, not cruelly, just calmly. "Yes, I am." He laughed once. "You don't have anything." "I have more than you think," I said, and reached for the second folder I'd kept beside me. This one had fewer documents, but they were sharper. Emails with timestamps, receipts linked to illegal expense reports, a list of contacts I could call. He didn't laugh after that. He leaned back. "You'd really destroy everything?" I looked him in the eye and said, "You already did. I'm just choosing what survives." He stared at me for a long time. There was a flicker of something. Fear? Maybe. But more than anything, I saw calculation. The same way he looked at market trends, competitors, quarterly losses. He asked to speak to his lawyer. I nodded. "Of course, take the weekend." He didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He left the room without a word and shut himself in his office. For 2 days, we didn't speak except for updates about the kids. When Monday morning came, his lawyer emailed Mona. He had accepted every single term. There would be no court hearing, no public documents, no press, just signatures, silence, and monthly payments that ensured it stayed that way. We signed the agreement in a private conference room at Mona's office. It was the kind of sterile, fluorescent lit space designed to be forgettable. But I'll never forget that day. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. It was quiet, methodical, clean. Ryan arrived exactly 5 minutes late. No tie, eyes puffy. He didn't look at me. His lawyer did most of the talking. Mona did the rest. I just sat there, calm, deliberate, letting the process unfold like we were finalizing a business merger. In a way, we were. At one point, Ryan tried to interject, "This part here about the NDA, what if I just want to clarify something publicly?" Mona didn't flinch. "You don't. Not unless you want breach of contract litigation, fines, and press coverage." He looked at me then. "Finally. You really think you won?" I smiled gently. "Number, I think I ended it with dignity. You're the one who brought destruction into our home. I just gave it a door to leave through." He leaned back in his chair, that cocky tilt I'd seen for years. "This is extortion." "No," I said softly. "This is consequence." The documents were signed. By 3 p.m., the papers were filed. The settlement was sealed. The wire transfer initiated. By dinner time, he was gone. The children knew something was happening, but I never let the ugliness in. I told them we were going to have a new rhythm, 2 homes, but still a family. They didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. I never said a cruel word about their father. I let him do that work himself with his absence. Weeks passed. Ryan did exactly what I expected. He painted himself as the victim to his closest friends, said I blindsided him, said I was vindictive, but he never said it publicly, not once, because he knew the cost. And more importantly, he knew I was still holding the full archive, just in case. One day, he tried to renegotiate the payments. He emailed Mona, said he was reevaluating his financial commitments. We sent him a single line in response: "Review Section 6.2 of the NDA." He never brought it up again. He pays me every month, quietly, automatically. The wire arrives like clockwork, just enough to remind him I'm not the one who lost. I didn't burn his business down. I could have, but what I did was worse. I left him standing in the empire he built, knowing that every floorboard, every award on the wall, every dollar in his bank account is protected by my silence. He can't talk about me. He can't brag. He can't explain. He tells people we amicably separated, that we grew apart. He never gets to tell the real story, and that eats at him more than anything I could have done with lawyers or interviews or lawsuits. Because silence, when chosen, is power, and now he pays for mine. It's been 14 months. I live in a smaller house now, cozy. Sunlight hits the kitchen just right in the mornings. I planted a garden, tomatoes mostly. Something about watching things grow again, on my terms, feels healing. I went back to school part-time. Nothing dramatic, just a certification course I always wanted to finish. I've started consulting for women-owned startups. Quiet work, intentional. I keep my name off websites, but my hands are in the soil of something meaningful again. The kids are adjusting well. They still ask questions sometimes. Why daddy moved out? Why we don't talk much? I answer honestly, but with care. Sometimes people grow apart, I tell them, but what matters is that they are safe and loved. And they are. I see Ryan every few weeks when he picks them up. He's always polite now. Too polite. His emails read like legal memos. He refers to me as Claire again. Not the wife, not just a housewife, just Claire. He doesn't know I kept the first check he ever wrote me after the settlement. I never cashed it. It sits in a box in the back of my closet, along with the deed to this new house, my certification paperwork, and a note I wrote myself the day I decided to gather evidence instead of scream. The note says, "Let him think you're weak." That's how you walk out holding everything. Sometimes people ask if I regret not taking more, if I wish I had exposed him fully, crushed the company, told the world. But the truth is, I didn't need to. He lives every day knowing I could. That's enough. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they held all the power? Let me know in the comments. Your silence might be stronger than you think. And if this story made you feel something, share it. Somewhere, another woman is quietly building her escape.